Hello to you both. I am putting out my grocery delivery just got here. I'm putting out the link to the live chat right now, so we'll get started in a moment.
Good. Webcam issues, which is there we go. Set up.
There we go.
I think I might have cat issues during this meeting. I apologize if I do.
No, big same. Yeah, she's been having fun crawling behind me and knocking my computer over. So she does that during my therapy sessions.
Oh no.
Lots of fun.
Okay, just double checking that the stream is working. Okay, that is working, so I'm not gonna worry about that. Kelly, can you hear us okay? Hoping Kelly can hear us okay. I think Princess might be coming as well. Whoop. I forgot to mute the YouTube because there we go. All right, Kelly is saying they can hear us but cannot unmute. That's interesting. Let me see if I can do it. I can ask to unmute. I don't know if that helps. Oh, I see Kelly.
You do? Oh,
yep. Oh, I hear Kelly.
Yay.
Okay.
I was monkeying around with my computer. The camera is usually this way, but every so often this camera takes over, and I was trying to figure out where I was when I was. Hi, everybody.
I love the idea of the camera just deciding to take over. I think we can all relate to that. All right. I look like I'm ready for summer. So
It is like 85 degrees here. I just came back from a little beach near me. I had to run and change from a sundress. Here she is. Hi. I spent all afternoon relaxing on my beach towel that says hello summer, like it's not March outside. It was so nice.
Oh man, it's like 33 degrees here in Chicago. Yesterday it was like 60. So it's like, make up your mind, please. I would like to stop having the seesaw.
It's hot here too. I'm in Texas. I don't know why I have this heavy sweater on, but it's hot.
I have a fan right off screen because it's like too hot, but I refuse to turn on the air conditioning in March. Like that's just wrong. So I won't do it, but it's hot.
All right, I think we're good to go. We have our main panelists and discussants here today. So I want to welcome everyone to this popular culture dialogue. We had planned to do this last Thursday, but that was also unfortunately the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it did not seem like the right time for this topic. It still kind of feels weird, but maybe there might be some good to come from this. But I also think there's been some interesting things happening that also relates to these concepts. So that might be useful to talk about. Let me put it that way. But yes, today we're talking about parasocial interaction and shipping. So it's a concept, at least with parasocial interaction, that's been around for almost 70 years now, I believe. So we'll kind of understand a little bit more about what those concepts are and how they can apply. But as always, I want to allow our discussants to introduce themselves and what brings them here. So I'm going to go with the person who's having their debut on one of these dialogues, and I'm going to go to Kelly.
Hi, everybody. Kelly King. I live in San Antonio, Texas. I am not an academic, although I work in the field of academic publishing. And I came here through attending some academic conferences, and my entree into all this is by way of BTS and becoming a fan, and then starting to read a lot of papers and other scholarship about these specific topics as related there, although I know it's much broader than that, but that's how I squirmed into this is through that particular, I'm going to mix metaphors, lens. So, and did you want to know anything else, or is that adequate?
That's good. I mean, if there's anything else you'd like to say, of course, but yeah, I think that gives us a good start. And I like the fact that you brought up, already a couple of the big ideas I think here are, fandom, of course. There's a lot of fan studies that uses parasocial interaction. And then the relationship, I think, of parasocial interaction when it comes to real people, or whatever you want to use for real these days, but with musicians and celebrities of that sort and BTS. And I wonder if it complicates the fact that you are looking at possible cross-cultural parasocial interaction. Oh, that's a mouthful. So there's some stuff to chew on there already. I see Princess is able to join us. That's wonderful. So let's go then to Christine for
good. Sorry, good afternoon, or is it evening? I don't know. I've had a little issues with my internet. That's why I'm late.
Totally okay. All right, we're going to go to Christine to introduce herself.
Hello, I've been on a few of these panels. Happy to be back again. Excited to talk about parasocial interaction and shipping. So I'm Christine Tomlinson. I am a lecturer at the University of California, Irvine in the School of Social Sciences, and I'm also a game studies specialist with the Digital Democracies Institute at Simon Fraser University. Most of my work, both teaching and research, focuses on video games. So I do a lot with video games and how people connect to those characters, ship them, and kind of have these very strong bonds with digital creations. But I also look into some of the more expanded stuff with fan studies, fan fiction, and broader popular culture as well. So excited to see what everyone has to say and get some different perspectives on this as well.
Great, and I think the bringing in the digital games, or just games in general too, is a fascinating way to complicate our understanding of parasocial interaction, because there's literal interaction with these characters. So it's definitely not just parasocial at that point. So great, glad to have you here. And we're going to go over to Colleen.
Hi, I'm Colleen. I am a PhD candidate at the University of South Carolina, getting my doctorate in English literature with a focus in popular culture. It's very vague and under quite a lot of discussion right now what my degree is actually in. But I'm actually taking my comps tomorrow with a focus on British pop culture. I don't know how that came around. I'm still kind of confused about that, but yeah, this is a nice distraction from comp anxiety. And yeah, I really love doing these panels. They're always a lot of fun. This one I'm particularly excited about because I am self-described shipping trash. I love shipping and fan fiction. I've actually worked a lot with fan fiction before and presented with the fan studies area at the PCA. But I also work with this like non-academically. I used to work for a like fandom kind of website, and I created a weekly series called OTP Tuesday, where every week I would write about a new ship, and I did that for like over a year. So like I'm really into shipping, and parasocial interaction is kind of new to me. I didn't learn about that until I was kind of getting more involved in Twitter and seeing people kind of talk about that there. So it's I'm really excited to kind of bring those two sides of things together and see how they interact.
Fascinating. It's interesting to me as someone who heard about shipping after I heard about parasocial interaction to hear about coming at it through the reverse. So your insights are going to, I think, be really illuminating, and I'm glad for that. All right, and then let's go down to Princess.
Hi, I'm Princess, and I'm from St. Lucia.
Oh, little quiet, Princess. Do you have a mic on those earphones?
You can't hear me?
It's very quiet.
We could hear you okay before you plugged the earphones in. We could hear you fine.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I plugged the headphones is plugged, but I don't know why.
Like with every new technology, there's always the fun of making it work. And then, you know, you get it to work one time, you think it should always work, but then it decides to stop. But yeah, it may be that it's the headphones themselves, because we could definitely hear you before the headphones.
Okay. Well, I would have to try to take them off.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? I took them off.
Perfect.
I'm Princess O'Nika Auguste, and I'm from St. Lucia, and I have a BA in English and History with a minor in Sociology, and I have 2 master's degrees in Religion and History, and I have certification in Medieval Religion, Medieval History, and Editing and Writing, a whole bunch of stuff. But I have been into Parasocial from since I was and shipping, especially shipping. I was into shipping from since I could watch the TV shows I've watched, because I used to write a lot of fan fiction back in the day when the fan fiction site was. so I used to ship a lot of, how you call it, I used to ship a lot of people who I thought they should be together, that wasn't together in the show. I shipped them.
Mm-hmm. So. This is fascinating too, and I like the fact that you're here, Princess, with your background in history and religion as well, because it makes me wonder. I mean, we talk about like shipping and parasocial interaction as relatively recent concepts and phenomena. But I do wonder the extent, especially when we think about religion, the extent to which you can apply those backwards in time throughout, you know, the history of human civilization. So I kind of hope we touch upon that a little bit. I'm going to go get my groceries before they freeze outside. But as I'm doing that, I would love for all of you to maybe help us by defining what we mean by parasocial interaction and shipping, and then maybe how they relate to each other. So I don't know if someone would like to take that on first, but I would love to get kind of that foundation of what we're talking about with these concepts.
I can go for shipping. I'm all in on shipping. I've got that one covered. Somebody else is going to have to do parasocial, but shipping, I've had to define this so many times, both academically and also to like my mom, who doesn't get it. So shipping is basically like the concept of creating an idea of a relationship between 2 characters, like Princess was saying, who should be together, right? Like that's the idea. Those characters should be together, whether or not they are in the show or book or game or whatever it is that the media that you're consuming. So it's a way of fan interaction that allows fans to kind of take control and ownership of the material that they're consuming and have a kind of share of the creation of this property, is the way that I like to see it, is that they're taking charge of something. They're not actively creating the material, but they are creating fan works, fan art, fan fiction that creates a greater fan community by joining together with other people who have this concept of this relationship that they want to be canon in the show, but it isn't, but they can make it canon in their own fan works. So for me, shipping is big in fan community, fan ownership, fan interaction, and the way that fans kind of interact with the material that they're actively consuming. I'm not sure I actually define shipping, which is the desire for 2 characters to be in a relationship, which is where the word ship comes from, and that like force of wanting that to be together builds into shipping. And I think this is where we kind of transition into parasocial, that desire. So if somebody wants to pass the baton.
Yeah, I can take up the parasocial part of it if that's okay with everyone. So with the parasocial element, the idea of parasocial relationships that Carolyn kind of alluded to, this has been around for a while. Effectively, once you had some kind of media where people could consume it and feel like because of this regular viewing or listening to this personality or character, they feel connected to them. And this has gotten increasingly complicated, as also alluded to earlier, with something like video games or even online streaming, where to a degree you do have an interaction, but parasocial relationships were always conceived of as this one-way social interaction. This isn't a person that you know, it's not even necessarily a person that's real, but you feel some kind of emotional attachment to them. And I think that that emotional attachment or that feeling of friendship that doesn't necessarily actually exist is what gets us to something like shipping. You have this investment in these characters, you want the best for them, you want them to be happy. And so as part of that, you can have these linkages of this is the best possible future for these characters that I feel this connection to. And that's the kind of outcome that I want to see. If anyone wants to add on to that, please feel free.
That was exactly how I would have been describing it as well. I was looking, there's another term that we can bring in. I have to try to remember, but yeah, I mean, I got into parasocial interaction when I was also interested in identification and the ways in which we relate to people that we only really are aware of, let alone know through the media. And so given the history of mass media studies and being focused primarily on the mass media, this was a concept that emerged more in the 1950s, and it's largely been applied, of course, to film, television, and radio, but it's been increasingly applied elsewhere. And what's interesting is that, and I still have to find that article, there was a presentation at MPCA this past fall where a young scholar was talking about the ways in which social media is impacting this idea of the parasocial interaction. And there's a different term for it. I can't find it right now, so I'm looking for it. But it does kind of change that idea when you're able to, through social media platforms, actually interact with these people that you don't know and to get some type of response coming back. So it changes the dynamics a little bit. But I think, like what Christine and Colleen were saying, we still have these underlying emotional connections and assumptions that seem to be driving a lot of what's going on here.
I think that parasocial interactions starts out with crushes, like you have a crush on this celebrity, and then it gets, I don't know whether worse or better, depending on the person, gets worse or better as time goes on. You know, I had a crush on Tom Cruise, but and Denzel Washington. With Denzel, it got better, but with Tom, the more I found out about him, the more I was indifferent to it. But yeah, it starts out with a crush. You start having this crush on this celebrity, and sometimes people take it too far, and then it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I can legit recall my first crush wasn't even on a celebrity, even though that was Christian Slater, because early 90s Christian Slater, chef's kiss. But my first one was Luke Skywalker, and he's been my legit love ever since. Every man is compared to Luke Skywalker in my mind.
Big same.
And Mark Hamill as well, but definitely Luke Skywalker. And I think it's interesting, though, that you mentioned crush, because I'm thinking, at least in like how I picture crushes in American popular culture, even if it's someone that you're in school with, it may be someone who has no idea you exist. That's kind of like this stereotypical girl crush of boys. And I kind of wonder if that's kind of related to then this this emotional connection or the desire for it, but it's completely being unrequited and it's not reciprocal.
I think when especially younger people have a crush, they do create sort of a fictional fantasy world in their mind about the object of their crush, which is sort of parasocial. And it seems like just proto fan fiction. It's like the earliest fan fiction you ever write is you pretending that, you know, Brett from social studies really likes you back, and then you imagine all of these things that you could do together. Yeah, these things are all so hard to tear apart. They're all so intertwined so tightly.
See, I think that's really interesting because, like I said, I only learned about parasocial interactions or parasocial relationships is how I learned about it from social media, like you were saying, Carrie Lynn. And there was a tweet going around recently that was like, you know, you're a big name Twitter account when there's lore about you, which I think goes into what you're saying, Kelly, where like people create this fan fiction about these accounts. And that's, you know, parasocial relationships. I was learning about that from these Twitter accounts who are like, you know, you think you know me because like, you know, you comment on my tweets or occasionally I'll respond to you, but I'm actually a real person. You have no clue who I am. We have no actual relationship. And so like, you need to be careful how you talk to me because like, I'm a real person. Like, don't just assume that I am the persona that you see. And I think that goes to like celebrities and everything too. And also like thinking back to what Princess was saying, like, as you learn more about somebody, it can change your kind of perception. I was thinking about like the milkshake duck phenomenon, which if you don't know, the milkshake duck phenomenon is like when somebody is like wildly popular or like goes viral on social media and then you find out something and it's like, oh, this is really horrible. They're a bad person. So I'm thinking about like, you might like somebody and think that they're great and you have this whole fantasy of them in your head. And then you find out something that's like an integral part of them, like finding out anything about Tom Cruise. And suddenly you're like, wow, okay, I don't want anything to do with this. Because you've created this fantasy of them in your head that it has nothing to do with the real person because you don't know them, but you think, oh, I know this person, that's my crush, I know them. And it's not real. None of it is real.
And I think in some regards, at least some types or forms of parasocial relationships are also based on exposure. Like I've seen a lot of people who get very invested in podcasts, for example, who are like very much invested in them as people, and you listen to them all the time and it becomes this regular part of your schedule. And it's sort of like you're hanging out with friends in a very passive way, which I think contributes to that as well. And it sort of takes away from that crush element, but it's still like this very strong sense of, this is my friend, I know everything about them. And you have this very real sense of closeness that may or may not be real. It is that fabricated thing that we're talking about.
I think some well, podcasters and celebrities sort of feed into that. They want to build up that kind of we're friends relationship because it helps them establish, you know, a larger listener base or whatever, which, you know, all just sort of feeds into success or, you know, career success, financial success, rather than really building relationships with anybody.
Or to blatantly attack Carrie Lynn here, Mark Hamill, and building his popularity on Twitter by responding to fans who like tag him and things. He responded to me once and I was like, oh my God, it's Mark Hamill. And it's like, it's a blatant PR thing, right? He responds to the fans and that makes him look like, oh, he's just a cool every guy, when no, he's a celebrity. We don't know anything about him, but we think we do. He's Mark Hamill. He's so cool. He's so chill, but do we really know anything about Mark Hamill? No, I'm so sorry, Carrie Lynn, I had to.
No, I know. But it is also the idea though, too, is like, how do you even know it was Mark Hamill who wrote that tweet and responded? It's something that coming from professional wrestling, because I've had a number of interactions with professional wrestlers via Twitter where they like things or so on and so forth. But I've even had professional wrestlers that, you know, we go to the live show and you see them, you walk up to them and you say who you are, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember meeting you, and things like that. I mean, it feels good to have that type of recognition, but the authenticity of it is, you know, it's either you decide to accept that it's authentic, or, you know, you just don't care, I guess.
Colleen, William Shatner replied to me on Twitter once, and it's still like, I want to print the tweet and like frame it, because it's like, and I'm pretty sure that he does his own tweeting, because he says things that are remarkably unpopular and really puts his foot in his mouth often. So I'm pretty sure that's him.
Princess?
I think Stephen King and J.K. Rowling do their own tweeting too. But thinking about the fan interaction and about finding out stuff, I don't know if there's a correlation, but remember the case with Cardi B and that blogger? And the blogger was sprouting lies about Cardi B. If like she knew Cardi, or she knew this was happening, this was true, and Cardi B sued her and won. So I think that case is a case of parasocial interaction gone wrong.
Well, and this idea too of, you know, celebrities and podcasters and whatnot trying to present themselves as friends with their fans, that's legit taught in integrative marketing communication. You teach this idea that you're building a brand and you're building relationships between your customers and your brand. And so with social media, you're then able to develop more of those intimate relationships, because like with a podcaster, if you've got those earphones in, it's a very intimate relationship, body-wise, embodied. So it's legit seen now as the way to do business, which, you know, is in some ways nice because it's recognizing, you know, the importance of people and their emotions. But on the other hand, it is kind of manipulative.
And sort of just thinking about that friendship marketing angle gone awry. I can't remember the exact details on it, but there was an incident with a popular Twitch streamer where someone just arrived at their house because they felt that closeness and they felt like they were friends with this person because there was that element of interaction and also that parasocial feeling of a relationship. So there are kind of risks associated with that as well that I think become a lot more complicated when you associate it more with a real person than, say, a character in a piece of media.
Mm-hmm. And I also wonder, and I don't know if this has changed, this might be my age showing, but is the stereotype about who engages in parasocial interaction, relationships, and shipping, is it still pretty much gendered towards the feminine? Okay. That's what I was wondering. I'm getting some yeses, but Christine is saying maybe not.
I think it in part, and like I don't have solid numbers on this, but I'm just basing this off of observations. It depends on where you're looking. So like I see a lot of parasocial kinds of feelings coming out of conversations about podcasters, coming out of conversations about Twitch streamers, incidents like I mentioned with Twitch streamers, and that tends to skew more male, if only because of the audiences for those things. But if you're looking at works of fiction, you do see a lot more women being invested in it. And then I don't have gender breakdowns for this, but like with a game like Mass Effect, I believe some of the numbers I've seen say that it's mostly a male player base, but you see a ton of shipping with a couple of characters in there as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. As soon as you started talking, I went, no, I was saying yes, but gaming really takes it in the opposite direction completely. What I see is way female dominated.
Yeah, but
that's not the whole world.
The stereotype is definitely still that this is women, and particularly the stereotype is that this is either young girls, weird housewives, and just in general unsettled women who take things too far, which I think goes into the parasocial aspect of it, is that shipping is kind of viewed as something that is too far. And I think especially in the realms of like real person fiction, like when we get out of fictional characters and move into things more like we were talking earlier about, like music fandom, which is one of the like biggest sections of real person fiction, is people shipping. You mentioned BTS. I know absolutely nothing about K-pop, but I know that that's like a huge area of fandom, and there's, as far as I know, a lot of shipping in that one. I'm also thinking about, and this is my age showing, One Direction shipping, which was huge back when I was in like early college, right? With the Larry Stylinson.
Yeah.
And I promise I was not a One Direction fan. I just know this because I study fan fiction. But right, like that was such a huge thing, and that was because of parasocial interactions. These fans who were predominantly female, feeling that they knew these musicians well enough to judge whether or not they were in a relationship, despite the fact that there was no kind of actual evidence, I'm gonna say. I feel like I'm gonna get attacked by One Direction fans for saying that, but there was no actual evidence that they were ever in a relationship. And I'm almost positive that, wasn't Larry, like, didn't he have a kid during this time? Like, he got a girl pregnant. So like there was evidence to the contrary, but they had such an idea in their head of who these musicians actually were, and believing that they knew them better than, I guess, they knew themselves, so that they were destined to be in this relationship. And so I think like that brings it back to shipping, is knowing, like believing that you know these people so well that you could predict who they were, like who they were in a relationship with, who they loved. And that was such just like an overwhelming part of fandom at that point in time, was shipping these two musicians. And you still see One Direction fan fiction. Not like you did back in the days of Wattpad and My Mom Sold Me to One Direction, which I still don't understand what that was, but you still do see some kind of Larry Stylinson fanfic, and people, I don't even remember how long ago they broke up, but people are still kind of diehard Larry fans. And I'm imagining that that's, I don't think the same kind of thing is happening with K-pop. I hope nobody is writing My Mom Sold Me to BTS, because I feel like there's some really uncomfortable racial tones to that. But that, I imagine that kind of real person fanfic, musician, interpersonal or parasocial relationship, I think that kind of has transitioned over from what I've seen from K-pop fandom on Twitter, which I try to stay away from because I don't know anything about K-pop and I just get really confused.
It's speculation, but people have been saying for a while that whole Larry thing is really what drove One Direction to break up, to disband. So it's a lot of stress to be in the public eye that way, and having people tell you how you feel about things, which I can imagine is pretty frustrating.
Princess?
Yeah, I remember that whole One Direction thing. I think he did have he did get a girl pregnant at
Lewis did,
the
yeah.
time.
I don't know why.
And there's still like a lot of weird One Direction fan fiction on Wattpad and fanfiction.net. I stay away from these things now. I'm grown, shows my age, but I'm grown. I don't go, I mean, I peek on to see what's going on, but I do see a lot of fan fiction stories on One Direction on Wattpad. I wanted to talk about they also, the public also actually, when they do ship, they ship celebrities together, like Lizzo. I can't remember, it was Chris Evans. Chris Evans said something nice to Lizzo on her on the Instagram. Chris Evans and Lizzo do their own Twitter. They post a lot and do their own Twitter. and Instagram. And then the fans at once, both their fans start shipping them together. Even though they're not together.
There's one interaction on Instagram and
yeah, and then I have a problem with it because it's like it feeds into the stereotype that this black woman who is body positive and who's been bullied by people who doesn't like her body, rescued by this white, tall, handsome man. So I have a problem with it because it has a lot of racial stereotypes. Even though Lizzo and Chris Evans don't seem to see it because they also play on it, but I have a problem with it.
Yeah, and that's interesting too when you think about how the actors, the celebrities themselves react to and sometimes incorporate what the fans are doing in this regard, the fans' relationships with them or the fans' ideas about them in some way start to inform performances and the fictions that are also being told. I know Supernatural did this. I never watched, but I know that they incorporated that type of thing as well. And then on the flip side, you look at something like Sherlock and how they reacted to all the shipping going on between Watson and Sherlock. I mean, do you think that actually helps when essentially pop culture producers recognize what the fans are doing, or does that hurt in some way?
I can answer that for BTS specifically, because there's just a ton of shipping that happens there, and they communicate with fans by way of an app called Weverse, and post things on there, and fans answer back. And somebody asked one of them specifically about his relationship with another of the band members. And he said, you need to get out of your imagination. It's not good in there. And they all took that to mean that it was some sort of romantic need to hide their relationship, and turned that into a way of strengthening their belief that it was a real relationship. So I guess it can backfire if you actually address it specifically, because it seemed to there.
Yeah, I was gonna add to that. I have my Supernatural poster here. So this is where I get to talk about three of my favorite fandoms: Supernatural, Good Omens, and Hannibal. All three of them to some extent have done this to varying degrees. Obviously, Supernatural kind of leaned into some of the Destiel stuff, Dean and Castiel. A lot of shipping had happened for a very long time, and it's very complicated how that even started. But people picking up breadcrumbs and then kind of just running with it. But that one backfired pretty spectacularly because it was read by a lot of the fans as baiting. So yeah, they were trying to toss people this sense of, okay, we've seen your shipping, here you go, we're finally incorporating it into the show. But it was so, like, in many ways symbolic and performative that it did not connect with anyone. And then you have, on the other hand, like Good Omens or Hannibal, where the creators loved it, and even the actors were doing things like reading fan fiction, shipping their characters, and were very excited about it. And I think that it reinforces a lot of those behaviors in the community, and it also lands a lot better with them because it feels, and we talked a little bit about authenticity a moment ago, it does feel more authentic to people when that's the case.
I'm also going to jump in on Supernatural, regrettably. I also think, going back to the real people, I think there's also the matter of like people shipping the actors, and I'm thinking here of cockles, unfortunately, and people reading the fictional relationship into the relationship between the actors, and getting so caught up into the relationship on screen that they were looking for hints of a relationship between Misha Collins and Jensen Ackles, because there was too much chemistry on screen or whatever for there not to be something happening, and this becoming like such a huge thing, and like both actors were married, and so like this was insulting to their wives. And I think I even remember reading something about how like this kind of damaged their friendship because they felt like they couldn't be close to each other anymore because of the way fans were reacting. So you can see this is also like going back to the parasocial thing, and again thinking that you know these actors better and thinking that they're hiding something, like you were saying, Kelly. It's like it all goes back to an overactive imagination and reading too much into things. And they're actors, they're supposed to look like they have something on screen, even if you're right, Christine, it was baiting, it was horrible. But they're supposed to look like there's something going on screen. That doesn't mean there's something happening, you know, between the two actors themselves, but because the fans are so invested in the relationship that they see, that it spills off the screen and off like fan fiction. They can't just like be satisfied with that. They have to be so invested in the actors as well. And again, just like with you were speculating with One Direction, like this being the reason that they broke up, again, this intense real person shipping driving apart two people who were really close, but not in the way that fans wanted them to be. And I know people also shipped Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles as well. And I think it also put some strain on their relationship. Like they used to say that, oh, we're actually brothers. And I think they're not very close anymore. So yeah, like with Supernatural, there was the on-screen shipping and like it went pretty badly in the end. But there was also the off-screen shipping and how that kind of took these three men that were really close and they had really good relationships after working together for ever, and destroying what was something really good and really close by trying to force like romantic aspects into something that wasn't there.
Thought I keep having as I'm listening to you experts talking is that it sounds to me from, you know, just a layperson's point of view, like a lot of this is about fans wanting to have control. They want to take control of the object of their affection and like make them have a relationship. I'm thinking of Bong Joon-ho with his 2 Oscars making them kiss each other, like girls do with their Barbies. Just wanting to take control over someone else's life, even though you're a virtual, literal, complete stranger to them. It's bananas.
But another show that the fans like to ship, I'm a Law and Order SVU fan. I don't know if anybody watches Law and Order SVU, but they like to, fans from the get-go, I think from the get-go, because the actors have such good chemistry from the get-go, fans who have been wanting Stabler and Olivia to get together. And you can really actually see the tension, even though Stabler was married. But I think now his wife is dead, and I think the show producers has how you call it, gotten them to kiss or something. I can't remember. I haven't seen it I haven't seen a couple of episodes, but I think the show producer got them to kiss, and I'm not sure what was the reaction to that. From what I read, a lot of fans were happy finally at last. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there were some fans that were shipping the real actors together because they really do have a lot of chemistry together. The 2 actors are really like, mm-hmm. You can see the chemistry. So sometimes the fandom does push too far, although the 2 actors still have remained married. So that's good that the fandom didn't destroy these 2 marriages. So, and they're friends. So I don't know, but fandom can push these take things too far. I think sometimes the fans forget these are real people and they want what they want. I think it's like maybe it's a mental illness. I think I'm starting to think it's starting to be a mental illness, collective mental illness.
I think Kelly really hit on like one of my buttons. And I think Princess, you're getting there too with like toxic fandom is one of the things that I study, and it comes down to ownership and leaving the realm of normal fandom and getting to the point where you just lose sight of what's real and lose sight of normal boundaries. And I've actually presented on toxic fandom and how it's all about ownership. So you like, I feel like you read my paper. But and like the most toxic fandom that I have ever seen and participated in, which is the Voltron animated show fandom, which is horrifying. And for them, it's so much about taking ownership that they literally have threatened the creators of the show when they did not get what they want. So they have literally lost so much sight of fandom, what fandom is supposed to be about is enjoying whatever media you're consuming with a group of other people who also enjoy the media that you're consuming. That's what fandom should be. But with toxic fandom, like Princess is saying, you've lost sight of reality. You've lost sight of why you're here and what you're supposed to be doing. And you've become so wrapped up in many cases, shipping. Shipping is a lot of times the basis for toxic fandom, that you kind of lose it and you start doing things that are inappropriate. You start harassing creators to the point where they feel unsafe, or that it destroys their relationships with the other creators that they're working with. And it comes down to ownership and feeling entitled, feeling like I have put in so much time and like I've consumed so much of your work that you owe me now. Like I'm just as much a part of this as you are, so give me what I want. And that's really what it comes down to, is ownership and entitlement.
Yeah, that was making me think of, I might derail us a tiny bit. Is that okay?
Oh yeah.
It's also making me think of a lot of the reactions that you see among video game players to people that like threaten this thing that they love. So if a game that's highly anticipated gets a bad review, for example, you see a lot of the same reactions and a lot of people like threatening the reviewer because it wasn't a perfect score, but this thing I love deserves that perfect score. And it's almost like another layer adding to it. It's not just connections to the characters, it's also potentially connections to these titles, this piece of media that they love so much that they want to in some ways protect, but also have that sense of control over. New thought, hadn't thought of it before, but Colleen, you were making me think about those reactions as well.
Toxic fandom, it's so much fun. It's so not fun to study, but it's very interesting to study.
It is. And thinking of hearing all of this too is making the psychologist in me think about how we develop cognitively and socially as individuals and as humans. And that idea, I'm coming back to that idea of having a crush, because unless our relationships are determined for us by others, it is a big learning curve to be able to figure out how to relate and connect with other people, especially when you start bringing it past friendship into romantic and sexual, because that's a process of developing intimacy that is very complicated. And it seems that in our modern mediated world, it's increasingly complicated because we have more of that freedom over who we can connect with and relate to. But then we have to negotiate those boundaries because no one is telling us where those boundaries are, like they might have in the past. So parasocial interaction then in this way could be read as trying to work out and negotiate these relationships and these boundaries. And maybe in the past, it was easier to not go too far down that path because you did have other people around you and you didn't have the, even performative interaction with your crush via social media. And you didn't have these communities of fans that were feeding into each other's shipping, essentially. So I wonder if we are looking at a point now where we need kind of that social literacy teaching coming back and talking more about, do's and don'ts or how to handle making even just relationships work. That was a rant. I'm sorry.
Also in the past, we presented to the whole world as ourselves. It didn't, there was no place to hide. If I'm talking in, crazy talk about Voltron and et cetera, it's me, you can see me, but social media just has put up this mask for all of us and we can hide. And some people, when they're able to hide, show, very unattractive sides of themselves.
Yeah, and I'm bringing out the sociologist in me a little bit. All of this is also making me think, these are happening in fandom spaces where these norms develop around how you interact with people or how you perceive things. And you get these kinds of tacit social approval as well on top of it that is a little bit different from those assessments that may have happened offline or outside of these spaces where you don't accumulate these sort of rules about how you can or cannot interact or perceive creators or characters or actors or whatever it might be.
Yeah, we need fans, like, I don't want to use the word policing, but we need fans policing each other and kind of teaching each other how to grow, but instead we end up with like a toxic self-developing, feeding into each other kind of situation where it just grows and it grows because you're reinforcing each other's toxic ideas instead of, people who have already learned how not to behave coming in and being like, hey, maybe not do this, because you see this a lot of times with older fans or like the veteran fans are very much not treated well by younger fans who are coming in and learning toxic behaviors and are really like, no, get out of here. Nobody cares about you. Go do your taxes. I don't know why they think we do taxes every day.
And feed your kids. Do your taxes and feed your kids.
I don't have any kids. My cat only eats so much, and I did my taxes back in January. I don't know what they want me to do, but they're always saying that, and so they're learning these toxic behaviors from each other, and there's nobody to tell them don't behave this way because they're not going to listen to anybody but the people who already agree with them. So it's just like a self-perpetuating cycle, and feeding on that negative energy.
I think it's a collective mental illness. It's a collective mental illness. Everyone is losing touch of reality and they're sick. That's the only way I could think about what's going on. And also, like what Kelly was saying, in the past, it was easier before. Well, I wouldn't know because Facebook, I was in high school or whatever when Facebook came out. So, but in the past, even in my generation, social media wasn't a big thing. I mean, we were still going to like comic. We were going to conventions for like sci-fi and fantasy in person. I don't know if this convention still go on now, but we were still going to conventions and we were seeing the real people. Some of those actors would bring their wives to those conventions. And so social media, now with the growth of social media, everybody's hiding. And so you don't see, and everybody's trying to be private. So the celebrities are being private. And so you don't see if they're married. Some of them, you don't see if they're married or have kids. And the fans are hiding behind social media. So everything is everyone is feeding off everybody.
Yeah, it's both easier to have relationships with a lot of people, but also harder to have good relationships. And that brings the communication studies person out then, because there's social penetration theory, which talks about how we use communication to develop that intimacy. And in some ways, fan communities kind of have a built-in assumption about intimacy because you're all liking supposedly the same thing. So you've already gotten rather intimate with a person, which then might lead people to start making assumptions based on that already established intimacy. And making assumptions then can, stop any communication from actually learning more about one another, because it's hard. Communication is hard, especially that divulging of the secrets in the personal is hard. So it's much easier to stay at that, oh, hey, we're all fans. Let's just, don't go any deeper than that. And I'm just going to start putting assumptions because I want to go deeper, but I'm also afraid to do so. What time is it? Okay, we got a couple more minutes. Are there any final comments or thoughts you want to share? Maybe things that you're thinking about that could be something that we should be researching or talking more about on this topic?
I don't know about that, but earlier when we started, Carolyn, you mentioned like how it might have been good to postpone because of things that have happened in the last week. And something that has really caught my eye is the really weird and uncomfortable fascination people have been having with Zelensky. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name because I don't watch the news, but how people have really latched onto him as not like a good leader or an inspiration, but as a sex symbol, and how really creepy it is that people have decided, like, all the weird tweets that are like every girl in your life has a crush on Zelensky now and you can't do anything about it, or like that one guy who said that he was pregnant after watching him do something cool. And like the way that somebody summed it up is like, Americans can't watch history happen without making it some sort of overly sexualized idea because of the way that we don't want to process these things. And that made me think about how like we are collectively having a parasocial relationship with the Ukrainian president because there's a war happening and we're all kind of not handling it well. So instead of handling it well, we're freaking out over the fact that he's Paddington Bear and he was on Ukrainian Dancing with the Stars. And yes, I'll admit it, he dances really well, but also saying that every woman in your life has a crush on him is, one, wrong, and two, really weird. Why would you say that?
And really,
there's a war happening.
Exactly.
Like, it's so minimizing what's actually happening. And the fact that this guy is actually really cool, not because he's Paddington Bear, which, yeah, that's kind of cool, I'll admit it, but because of the actions that he's taking to protect his people. Like, that's what we should be focusing on, not the fact that he looks like Jeremy Renner and Jeremy Renner should play him in the biopic of his life that we're eventually going to have. Like, why have we latched onto this? And that really is like the weird parasocial relationship that we're having to help us process the fact that there's a war happening.
But I think it's because of his actions. Some of it is because of his actions that people are making him, it's wrong, it's still wrong that people are making him a sex symbol because they see this man, this what's the word, this man who is all odds against him, but he still is going, this handsome man who's all odds against him, and he's going into the war fighting with his people. We don't know if he's going to make it alive. And so that kind of brings people to see, oh, this man is sexy, I want a man like that, but it's still wrong. But I don't think it's because of, I don't think people are intentionally sexualizing him because he looks good. I think his actions, I think some people are sexualizing him because of his actions. It's still wrong and we're handling it wrong, but I think it was a, yeah. It's just
he came to politics through being a performer, right?
Mhm.
So maybe that's his instinct, is to not go to political theory or talking about, whatever politicians talk about, but to his profession used to be presenting himself as an attractive person. Maybe that's his entire, toolbox.
This is also as people have pointed out, this is also the latest in a long trend of people in America weirdly sexualizing politicians in times of crisis. And people have unfortunately reminded me of the Cuomo sexual thing, which I had successfully managed to block out of my mind. And so this is the progressing trend of anytime there's a crisis, we latch onto a politician that we think is doing a good job and sexualize that politician, because that's the only way that we can handle this. What are you doing? And so yeah, he's a macho guy, like Princess is saying, he's doing the good deeds, and he's doing some really cool stuff. But also I see people mostly talking about his Dancing with the Stars stuff and making Paddington memes. And granted, they're pulling off some kick-ass quotes from the things that he's been saying. But when you see Paddington Bear saying, "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition," it kind of minimizes the impact of the kick-ass things that he's saying.
He's not the only politician people are sexualizing in this thing. They are sexualizing the other side, and even Joe Biden and everybody. So it's really yes, people are actually sexualizing the other side. I refuse to mention his name. But
I actually wonder, do we sexualize because sex has an end and usually that end is seen as happy, and we kind of want war to be the same way?
I'm asexual. None of this makes any sense to me. So I'm just sitting here very confused and very, very upset at all of this. I just like his Dancing with the Stars video. He dances very well. That's all I know.
And I think it might be, and this is just pure speculation on my part, but it might just be a natural progression of trying to consume political or physical world events as popular culture, which seems to be increasingly the direction that we go in, especially with the internet and memification of everything. Since there is so much of that parasocial interaction and there is so much shipping connected to that, it might just sort of lead to these cases of sexualization. I don't know if that made sense.
No, I think it does, and I think that actually might be a great place to end this, because I think we could just keep going on this topic. But I like the idea of, I think what we're pointing to is that, yes, this is maybe a very old concept at this point in terms of media studies and fan studies, but it still has relevance. It still can be applied in a lot of different ways. And even bringing it into political contexts now might help us to better understand the blurring of the lines between politics and fandom. And that, as someone who's really interested in that topic, I wholeheartedly welcome more conversation on it. So thank you, everyone, for coming into this dialogue today and having some really interesting insights, I think, into what we're talking about with parasocial interaction and shipping. So I hope you're all safe going forward. I hope it's warm where you are and comfortable, and let's all make it through. Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah.